Thank you for sharing your time with us. It's a privilege for us to be on this panel discussion, and I'm joined by distinguished people from the NGO sector, corporates, so it's a good mix. So the central government education budget in India seems to be about 1 lakh crore or slightly more in this current year. Which is about 3.1% of the GDP, while the National Education Policy recommends the budget to be about 6% of the GDP. Of course, the government is committed to get there, but then it may take about 20 to 30 years. So it's very significant in this context that various organizations, CSR, philanthropists, NGOs, are playing a role working alongside the government in some cases, working out of away or out of the government system in certain cases, but every little helps. Every drop in the ocean contributes, right? So that's where I wanted to sort of moderate this panel discussion in terms of loosely three aspects. One is to look at the past. So the panelists will talk about something from the past, something that they want to share in the current scenario in terms of their program structure, and in the future, what do we look for and how do we see the next few years turning out in terms of influencing the delivery models in education. So I'd like to begin with Lavanya and of course all the panel members to probably share one story of change that you have seen or observed in the programs that you run, where it led to an improved, the change because of the improved delivery model.
So thanks so much, and thank you all for being here today. I think for me, one of the most critical stories has been around the theme that we decided, which was small geography, deep impact. Typically, when you think of education or corporate supporting education, it begins with the infrastructure of a school and tends to end over there because you sort of created this decent learning environment and then you say, okay, that's enough. But for us, we decided to look at it as an ecosystem, take the principle of equitable education, and then look at those 9 schools that we were supporting from a perspective of not just infrastructure, but quality of education, how are teachers being upskilled, to deliver in the classroom, how was the school principal and school administration being trained and upskilled in terms of how they should administrate the school, think through timetabling, what kinds of teachers, what subjects, how they should hire, how they should manage the finances of the school, including the upskilling of teachers, and then how do you create that right kind of opportunity, which is based around, whether it's drama classes or Tinker Labs for the science buildings, and so on and so forth. But I think one of the things that came through very strongly to us is that while you may have built the system for the school and that might be something that's working, I think one of the things to realize is that for equitable education, and many of you might be parents here, how many tuition classes do your kids go for in order to be exam ready or board ready? So that became another aspect that we actually thought about, is how do you create an infrastructure for remedial classes for these students, given that many are first-time literates in their families and they have nobody to go to when they think of, clarifying a concept and so on. So I think we started this project roughly 5 years ago. And if I were to look at the benchmarking of student learning outcomes from 5 years ago to today, there's been almost a 48% increase in literacy basis NCERT. I think when you think of some of these things, it's not about the short-term gain, it's about the long-term play in terms of how do you create the infrastructure for the school, and that includes the community. Most of these schools typically have, a great focus towards the boy child, but how do you focus and bring in the girl child? How do you create that systemic awareness within the community, which is that there are more options? How do you bring in other organizations for the youth to think through what career options individuals have within the school? And then how do you use data and metrics to really see whether you are making a difference? So for us, I think that transformation really comes about as, yes, some part of what you can see in terms of, happy children in the school, school and so on, the right kind of teaching environment, the teachers are being upskilled and you're creating that equitable opportunity for all. But is your data really moving? Are your student learning outcomes moving year on year? Are your students not dropping out at class 7 and continuing to class 8? Are your students cracking the board exams? Are they moving on to complete their class 12 exams and then move into college and or diplomas in order to be employable? We do a lot in terms of education, but I think employability is the benchmark we really need to think about, is that the youth we are churning out, are we giving them the skills to be employable? And that's a lot more than just education. It's creating the right kind of exposure and so on as well, so that they actually genuinely become employable resources.
Thank you, Lavanya. Lokesh, want to add on?
Thank you, Deepak. So I represent Schoolnet India Limited, and there are multiple stories actually which we thought that, and then we selected one. So this is one of the intervention which we have undertaken in the remote districts of Assam, Dibrugarh, Tinsukia and Charaideo. So these are the remote schools wherein the students, they don't have any access to the digital, I will say digital resources. They don't have trained teachers. So what we did is we deploy education on wheels there. So we had computers on wheels. We made it more comprehensive in terms of adding life skills, adding financial literacy also for these students. With your request, Deepak, I have a small AV. If you allow me, I would like to play that.
Sure.
That will give a lot more idea of what we have done and how it has impacted actually the learners and the teachers in the community over there.
A 24-seater bus is redesigned as a mobile computer lab, a colorful space that opened a world beyond their imagination for the children.
यहाँ पे जो बच्चे हैं, ये बच्चे पहले कंप्यूटर क्या चीज़ है इनको पता भी नहीं था. जब हमने यहाँ पे बस लेके आए, हमारे यहाँ पे बैठे देखे, तो इन लोगों को बहुत अच्छा लगने लगा. अभी बहुत सीख भी चुके हैं. जिस दिन कंप्यूटर बस स्कूल में आते हैं, उस दिन जो स्टूडेंट आते हैं वो दूसरे दिनों से काफ़ी मतलब अटेंडेंस में फ़र्क पड़ जाता है.
Driving every single day for 5 years, the initiative has spread computer education beyond the school walls and into the lives of villagers.
कंप्यूटर लैब बस पे तो हमको कंप्यूटर के बारे में बहुत कुछ सिखाया जाता है. कंप्यूटर कैसा है, कंप्यूटर किसने आविष्कार किया था, वो सब सीखने को मिलता है. तो मुझे बहुत अच्छा लगता है.
So with this initiative, we impact almost 43,000 students across 1,200 schools. And these students comes from the underprivileged section of the society. And then they get exposure to the new age of learning. So this is the story of change which I thought I'll share with the audience here.
Wonderful model. Thank you. Mohini?
I'm actually delighted, Deepak, that I'm on this panel, because improving outcomes and delivery of education is exactly what we do. We, Max India Foundation, for Max Life Insurance. So I'd just like to tell you that we stepped into this field of education 3 years back. So I'm not going to restrict to one story. I'm just going to tell you a little, as you said, about the past. When we talk of solutions, the first thing that we have to look at is the problem. What are we trying to improve? Now, as you know, that a teacher is the fulcrum of the education system. The system evolves, revolves, and moves around the teacher. So therefore, we have to focus on the teacher if we want better and improved outcomes and delivery. And this is exactly what we are doing in 2-3 ways. One is, through Teach for India, we have fellows. Now, these are young, smart, well-educated and proficient people who come in and teach in a government school on a fellowship for 2 years. They become mentors, they can monitor, they can guide, and they teach. They are like a beacon for the rest of the teachers. And this has improved education outcomes in all these government schools where they're working by leaps and bounds. Similarly, through Teach for India, we also again have these mentor teachers who are first trained into the modern methods. For example, teaching through activity, role playing, storytelling, modern methods. And this again has brought so much of interest and life to classrooms. And we find that learning outcomes have just jumped up because there is interest. The children are the same. They are lovely human beings waiting to take in. But a teacher has to give. That is the crux of the problem. The teacher can only give what she has. So we have to train them. We have to educate them into the modern methods, and that's exactly what we are doing. We have another project where we are working with the mothers of young children. You know, in urban high-class societies, we now have preschools, pre-primary schools, because we've realized that a child is very intelligent and needs motivation, needs to be employed productively in various aspects. But the children from the underprivileged and from the rural areas don't have this facility. So therefore, how will they be spending their time? Will they just be sitting in the corner while the mother's cooking? No. We have started a project where, through Sarthi, the NGO, we are educating the mothers of these young children for early intervention and the communities. We teach them how to keep the children productively engaged, and soft skills, manners, speaking, social and values. Values, you know, start at home. They should, and they start from the very beginning. They say by the time you're 2, you've already learned a lot. So these are some of the ways in which I'll speak of others when Deepak permits me again. But what I wanted to say was, instead of focusing on one story, we have seen in the 3 years the amazing change through these. Again, we have the beacons with the Foster and Forge Foundation. We have Labya, which is on the social and emotional learning. So therefore, to teach the teacher, to help the teacher, to motivate and mentor her, we feel has been the one thing which has led to our greatest success. Thank you.
Look like holistic intervention. Thank you, Mohini. Viswanath, over to you.
Namaste. I'm Viswanath from Karadi Path Education Company, and I'll start my story from the end. So I was visiting this tribal school in Maharashtra in Nandurbar district, observing the classroom, seeing the children do the activities that are part of the Karadi Path practice and process. And at the end of it, the teacher out there, came to me and said, I expressed how happy I was to see what was happening there. And he said, you are happy that they are speaking English. But do you know what is the bigger thing that's happening here? Is the fact that the way my children walk, the way my children talk, their very attitude has changed, their confidence has changed, and this is the bigger, gift that actually that has been given to them. To go a little bit to the earlier part of the story, the project itself, which eventually was all the tribal schools in Maharashtra, was based on the Karadi Path method, which fundamentally says that in India we are effortlessly multilingual, and the way we learn the language is exactly the opposite of how we learn it in the classroom. So we said that, and the epiphany really was from Dharavi, where every 3 or 4-year-old speaks 3 languages effortlessly, and nobody taught this child any language. So our journey was really to look at the pedagogy, question the pedagogy, and question the fact that why do we have a language pedagogy that comes from monolingual societies? India should be the lab where you have to think through how language learning happens. So one of the bureaucrats in the tribal department, or the principal secretary, had come across another commissioner of education from Telangana, and he talked about how Karadi Path had changed the space there. And so she invited us to start with about 100 schools and said that देखेंगे कैसा चलता है, and then we will take it forward. In about 4 months, I think the impact was so obvious that we had scaled to all the government schools there. And coming back to the original point of the story is the fact that we have in our practice, in several of the areas, we sometimes forget that for 10 years this student is being taught English. For 10 years the student is working hard to learn and pass her exams. For 10 years the teacher who does not speak English herself is trying her darndest to teach English. And at the end of 10 years they have virtually nothing that they have actually derived. And so, Karadi Path is really that approach where in about 96 hours you can get to a functional proficiency. And now that we have done it in about 10,000 plus schools across India, I think the process is getting more and more traction, even though it is completely against the NCERT framework of language learning. I'll stop here.
Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure and honor to be here. Just adding to everybody's thoughts and the work that Pehlay Akshar has been doing, very similar to what Mr. Viswanath said, that how language learning is extremely important in a child's life. For Pehlay Akshar, we started in 2014 when the buzz of English language was going on, and we started thinking, why is it important for a child to learn English? Hindi hai, Marathi hai, English ki kya zarurat hai, right? And that's the same thought that we all have. But the fact is 53% and more content on digital platform is in English. If a child wants to pursue their studies further, they need to know English. That's a sad truth of India. We were a British colony and we've learned English that way, right? And that has to change. If you want to learn English language, it has to be as simple as learning our mother tongue. And that's what Pehlay Akshar does. We've been working in BMC and various other semi-urban and urban parts of India and focusing on making English a fun language to learn. There are two stories that I would like to talk about. One is of a girl named Siddhi. She was a part of BMC school. She comes to me one day and she tells, Didi, आज मैंने मेरे मम्मी के काम पे English में बात किया. She was so proud of herself, and I was like, it's a very normal thing, right? But even the people at her mother's workplace were surprised at how does she know the language, because her mother was a house help. And that was a huge change for me. The confidence that she has now, she's in 11th grade now, the confidence that she has is phenomenal. So that's a huge impact for me as an individual and for the organization. So yeah, I think enabling students and focusing on English literacy and learning mindset is something that Pehlay Akshar is working on, and we've seen a huge change in the learning outcomes as well.
Thank you, Ashmita. So I think with this, I think everybody has introduced a brief about the program that they run with some stories. We'll now move on to what I mentioned as the present. So with respect to your specific program or any component of the specific program, would you like to touch upon a bit more detail in terms of how that model or a new approach is working to improve the education delivery? And again, I'll ask Lavanya to start off.
So I think education delivery is much more beyond the schools. It's a marriage between government administration as well as what the schools are trying to achieve. Now, as you think of that, I think the way we've traditionally looked at it has been focused entirely on the school and leaving the government administration system to figure itself out. Now, to really drive that precipice of change, we've run partnerships with Pehlay Education Foundation, which really looks at building capability and capacity within the government, so improving those systems, as well as from our CSR portfolio, actually working with the schools on the ground as well. And then, as I said, when you think of the future really comes into the realm of how are you measuring that impact and how you're creating sustainability and scale. Ultimately, I think the answer is not just that that CSR or foundations or NGOs are involved in the sectors, how is the sector going to stand up on its own 2 feet and drive quality education? So as you think of that future, I think having the right kind of benchmarks, expectations from the public, driving that systemic change, bringing in the right players and partnership with the government is really when we'll start seeing that complete shift in the narrative. Mohini talked about the teacher. I'm a great believer of this as well. I mean, you throw a stone, there are thousands of things happening for students, but a teacher impacts students year on year on year throughout her entire professional career or his professional career. So how do we really create teachers that have the capability to think of differentiated learning in the classroom? I think we also need to move past the idea of just traditional learning, which is that, you know, we'll teach math, English, science, history, etc., but really focus on the fact that we have children coming into the classroom with different capability levels, and then how do you really engage with them and bring them up to par as well. So I think there's, you know, we're about 30% of the journey. We have loads, you know, a long way to go as we try and bring this ecosystem together, but it's behooving on all of us to work and start walking on that path.
Thank you, Lokesh.
Thank you, Deepak. So we as a Schoolnet operate with more than 70,000 schools across the country with various state governments and corporates. And we impact almost 25 million of students. So our endeavor is to improve the delivery of education, improve the learning outcomes at each and every stage. So one of the present assignment or the intervention which I would like to highlight upon here is, we partnered with Government of Gujarat, and this was during the mid of the COVID when the learning was not happening actually for the public sector of schools, and the students were at home and they were finding it difficult to how to connect with the students. We kind of designed a learning management system with the state-specific curriculum aligned to the Gujarat in Gujarati and English, and also provided those tools wherein the remote education can be conducted, virtual education can be conducted, and all these modules which were designed keeping in mind the learning outcomes. And there was a complete dashboard also which was made available to the administrator. So idea was to link the teacher and the student and the administrator also. And we could do it. Yes, today we have almost more than 5 million students from the government of Gujarat accessing that platform. And it is G-Shala, one of the path-breaking initiative which has been undertaken by Government of India across these states, and which has become a model project for other states also to follow. So this was the intervention, Deepak, which we did during the COVID, and we continue doing this for next 3 years. So we are there with the government, partner with them.
Great. It's nice to know that a COVID intervention is seeing continuity.
So it is like continued now, and now, you know, because it is hybrid now, right? So, and hybrid, we cannot rule that out. And the students are also finding it difficult because they are getting the same learning ecosystem when they go home. They can connect back with the teacher. Teacher can give them assignments. So it's kind of a linkage between the teachers and the student.
Thank you, Lokesh. Mohini, over to you.
Thank you, Deepak. I would like to speak about a unique, actually, initiative, which is one of our flagship, you could say, because we implement it ourselves. And this is C-learning, which is social, emotional, and ethical learning. To us, and I think maybe all of you agree, it's the most important thing. Because education is not the 3 R's, not just reading, writing, and arithmetic. More important is the individual you're going to come out to be. And therefore, to teach children to be compassionate, to be helpful, to understand each other, to be polite, and how to mix together, how to be a social entity, how to sit together. And the emotions they go through at different stages, in different scenarios, is very important. This is a very structured, It is actually in partnership with Emory University of the US. And when they brought it to India, we are the partners, Max India Foundation. So we have a separate vertical in the foundation, which is C-Learning. And we conduct workshops, we conduct talks, we conduct classrooms all over the country, actually. All over the country, Pune, Maharashtra, Bombay, Delhi, everywhere. And we've been luckily able to do this during the pandemic as well, because we had the digital platform, and now it is hybrid. And we have countless workshops. Now what happens is, this is also based on the old Indian value system and is in synchronization with the beliefs of the Dalai Lama. So here, when you have compassion, when you're taught to be compassionate, to help, to think of each other in a world where everyone is becoming so selfish and so self-centered and motivated that it seems as if you are there at the expense of everybody, or you have to fight everything out to survive. That is the kind of an attitude which a lot of children are growing up in, especially in urban spaces and even in the very highly valued public schools. So this is a great, very, very important aspect, and I'm happy to share this, that it is through various mediums. It's also through mediums of art, through mediums of workshops, mediums of play, of role modeling, that these values are taught to children. Now, we have been able to make so many people interested. We have had thousands and thousands of people who have done this course and who have started implementing it in their own spaces. And therefore, we are very hopeful that this is going to make a huge dent, because what you think is what you are, and what you are is going to make the future. So we believe that alongside with your academic education, this is equally academic, but this is equally or more important, because it's your value system in space. You know, small things like thank you and sorry. Children need to learn that right in the beginning in a communal space where everybody does it with everybody else. And that's the starting point. And this, I would say, is the present and the most unique and powerful of our projects today, besides everything. Thank you.
Thank you. Allowed the SEAL framework, very nice, particularly value-based education system, which I think has our roots in history, but somewhere went down in the last 100 years or so. Yeah.
Started in our days, but gradually there was more time because everybody wanted physics, maths, and chemistry marks to be very high. So where was the time for values?
Yeah. Thank you, Mohini. Over to you, Viswanath.
So during the pandemic, government schools were shut. Everybody made an effort to reach out in various different ways, be as creative as possible. We had a community outreach program where the teacher went and did a lot of innovative things using the materials that were there. We also won, the project of our community outreach was audited and looked at by the London International Book Fair, and we won the International Excellence Award. But this is the big lie that we still continue to tell ourselves, that things are almost returning to normal. There's a kid who has not gone to school in class 1 and class 2, and you're administering class 3 syllabus and class 3 exams. So this is something that stands out starkly today. But the big thing that we really have to look at is the fact that, how do we gratify ourselves with the big lie of assessment that we have been doing year on year in these places? And especially if you take, let us say, English as a language. Any state you go to, the 10th standard syllabus of English is very high order, okay? And these children who can't speak 5 sentences of English are passing those exams. The moment you kind of give yourself that gratification, you feel that sab theek hai. There's nothing major that we need to do as far as the space is concerned. And so probably one of the biggest things that we must challenge, and even when we look at, the ASAR reports or the assessment that is done, what is the assessment done on? The assessment is done on reading and writing rather than understanding and speaking. Even on a language parameter, and this is you're coming with a major scientific perspective in terms of how you're doing the assessment, and you're starting with, can the child write I mean, how fundamental is that? Because a child in Bihar who's learning in Hindi medium, who may have a mother tongue of Maithili, does not understand Hindi either. So when it looks at many of these, elements, I think the first thing to begin questioning today is the fact that, how do we actually completely rejig the assessment system so that we start becoming accountable? Because right now the assessment, allows us to escape accountability.
Just adding to my panelist, so during COVID, I think everybody innovated, pivoted to the digital platform. So did Pehlay Akshar. We conducted virtual training for teachers. We created bank of videos which were aired on Doordarshan for students in Maharashtra and Goa. But now that the schools have reopened, the learning gaps are massive. They always existed, but it increased furthermore. And while we were doing assessment and trying to understand what is going on, like rightly Sir said, that a standard 8th and 9th standard child cannot read 3-letter words, cannot comprehend even a simple sentence said to him or her. And that's a huge gap. So highlighting and just rethinking all of that, it was necessary for us to be present in the school, not just for students, but also for the teachers, because teachers are unable to bridge that gap at this current point because they don't know how to. So how do we work? How do we ensure this happens? So Pehlay Akshar has launched a project called the Learning Room, wherein we are creating a space, not just a physical space, but also ensuring that we are available for the students to improve their learning outcomes, focusing on English literacy and 21st century skills. But what if Pehlay Akshar is not there after a year or two if you don't get the government permission? It's necessary that we are able to sustain this, and for that we are working with the headmasters, the teachers, even the peons and the help that are available in the school, because as we all know that the government teachers have so many duties and they have so many trainings constantly. There has to be somebody in the school at least going and playing some video for a child which is available. There are so many organizations came up with so many digital content. At least go and play that for a child. At least they'll grasp something. The more exposure to the language, the easier it becomes for a child to learn. And that's the project that I want to highlight here today, that it's not just the student, but it's the entire system that we need to work with. Because as an organization, as a CSR, we can only approach that many students. It's important to create a long-term impact and a deeper impact by working with teachers, with headmasters, with the block beat officers, all of them. So that's the focus for us at Pehlay Akshar.
Thank you, Ashmita, and I would like to stay with you. Time is short. What's your view from the back, in the sense, we talk about students who prefer the back benches, and I think Abdul Kalam has quoted, they are some of the brightest students. But assume you are in the back bench and you are looking into the horizon. What is that wish, what is that view of the future that Pehlay Akshar Foundation is working towards?
So the wish and the goal for Pehlay Akshar is that a student from an underserved community or who is a first generation learner is able to at least pursue their further education or at least get an entry-level job. And that can only happen, sadly but true, is by knowing basic communication and basic English. And that's the goal for us, that the child should not go back into being a house help or a laborer. There is a scope, the world is changing, India is changing, there are multiple job opportunities for them, and they should try and approach that. And that's the goal for Pehlay Akshar, and we are hoping that we are able to reach there.
Thank you so much, Ashmita. Over to you.
I think next 2 weeks from now, we are hosting a conclave called Raising Learners for India 2040. You try to imagine that world, and you look at the so-called youth capital of India, and you look at the bulk of our students learning the way that they do. And we have to be, very, very urgently concerned about everything that is happening. I know that this is not a question of predicting doomsday as much as looking at, what kind of innovations are acceptable, why ideas that have been rooted in the past can be wrong, despite a majority of them agreeing, and it having worked for a few people. But it is not working as far as the larger, context of the government schools is concerned. Earlier during the informal conversations, I think Lavanya brought up the question of, is our B.Ed even relevant? And, does it actually enable a teacher in any way? Is a teacher who has a B.Ed qualified to teach? I think the resounding answer among anybody who knows what happens inside the B.Ed syllabus would say absolutely not. It is probably one of the biggest waste of 2 years that anybody goes through.
Thank you. Mohini?
We in Max India Foundation firmly believe that by improving education outcomes and delivery, we will be improving the overall condition of the people of our country. We will be nation building on every aspect, because with better education, there'll be better healthcare, there will be skills development, there'll be jobs, and there'll be economic prosperity. And therefore, going into the future, we are going to continue to work on the education platform, go deeper, continue to do what we are doing, which means trying to develop the child holistically by improving what he is offered through better training of teachers, through mentoring them and monitoring them, offering them more aids, advice, and methods of teaching, giving them an overall social, emotional, ethical teaching so that they feel secure. You know that mental health is a very big issue today, and children suffer from it. There are a lot of complexes. Among the underprivileged, we've seen it when we go to homes. There'll be a 10-year-old girl who's looking after 3 siblings and cooking at the same time. She's not even in school. So we need to get every child in school and give them the best so that they can be a part and parcel of the march towards a better, shining India. Therefore, in the future, more of the same, better delivery and outcomes by monitoring, and deeper and wider. Thank you.
Thank you. So we as an organization, I would like to take a step back here and actually visualize the problem in hand. The problem statement what we have in terms of improving the learning outcomes over a period of next 3 years is, of course, lack of digital infrastructure, especially in the government schools, good quality, personalized content that can be consumed by the learners, and trained teachers, as Vish also mentioned, right? So these are the, I will say, high-level problem statements what we have. And as an organization, we remain committed towards making those affordable digital infrastructure to these government schools. We have designed a learning app by the name Genio, so that provides an AI-enabled learning path for the students. We kind of make it a complete holistic solution when we undertake any intervention. So we remain committed for that in terms of incorporating teachers training, because that's the most important and critical element for any intervention. So as an organization, what we wish is we would like to democratize the education and skills at a scale, so that every learner, every user have the access and can actually, because we are dealing with the future of this country. So we remain committed in that domain.
Thank you, Lokesh. Last words from Lavanya.
So I think I'll be slightly controversial and say the reality is when you look at the overall education system across the world, it has evolved tremendously. When you think of how learning is being delivered, it has evolved. If you think of how the textbooks are being built today, it's evolved. If you think of how teachers are teaching today, it's evolved. If you think of how digitization is playing a role, it has evolved. I think the reality is, and that's the role I think we all need to play, is delivering that evolution to the government school system as well, where you can actually provide equitable delivery of the same kind of education across the board. And that, to my mind, is really where the gap is. It comes to capability, delivery mechanisms, and access. So from a CSR perspective, how can we ensure that we actually transfer that evolution back to the system and the schools here? I'll take a step back and say, if you think of how even CBSE or ICSE or IB or IGCSE or A-levels has been thought through and delivered, it's phenomenal how it's changed in the last 20 years. Phenomenal. But that thinking and evolution has not transferred past a certain set and section of society. So it's really, that is to me where the largest gap is, where we have to think of trying to deliver that change.
Thank you. With that, I'm happy to conclude this stage of the panel discussion. I know we have time for audience Q&A, but grateful for sharing your thoughts, particularly your programs, specific aspects of it, new models, approaches, SEAL framework. I'll remember it for many months and years in improving education delivery. Back to you.
Yes, so we are opening a window to ask the question and answer. I request volunteers to please hand over the mic to the audience.
Ma'am, quickly your name, organization, and get straight to the question, please.
My name is Asha. I'm from Rashtrattana Parishad, and I've come all the way from Bangalore. So we've covered most of the points, like, in government schools, the delivery of education, that is access, availability of resources, etc. But I think the one, of course, you covered the point of the, the lack of the B.Ed education being not so good in our country. But I think the most important factor is accountability. So any comments on that?
Around what?
Accountability of the teachers. So we can make everything available.
A teacher is judged every single day, and the result and her children are. So there's no question of not being accountable. I mean, your performance is seen. So if it's in a government system, you mean the principal is not involved? So that's what we are doing in CSR, is monitoring what the teachers do. And having been a teacher, I can tell you, you get your gratification every day. अभी आज बैठे मुझे पता है कितने लोग मेरी बात सुन रहे थे और कितनी नहीं सुन रहे थे, isn't it? So a teacher can be held accountable. I mean, the easiest way to do it is from the results and how the children perform on any other platform. So I don't know where the gap is. If it's somewhere else, then let me know.
Ma'am, I would just like to add to what she's saying that I don't think accountability is an issue with the teachers, at least with my experience. I think the skill is an issue. The gap is where the skill is. I think like Sir said, B.Ed or, ongoing trainings that are available for teachers has to be much, much better at equal par of other boards that are there. So I think more than accountability, skill is a gap. Yeah.
Thank you, Ashmita. Next question, perhaps the second row, please.
Hello.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay, I'll just quickly take it. Thank you so much for this discussion. It's so important, especially because every fifth Indian today is an adolescent. And I think we're really talking about a large section of our population. Talking about new models and approaches, I love that the fact that you all spoke about teachers, about school dropouts, academic drops, but and mental health. What's really a big issue today, which I'm Leena Kejriwal from the Missing Link Trust, and we're working on prevention of sex abuse and exploitation of children. What we've realized today is that adolescent safety is today of utmost importance for them to reach any academic excellence. Because most children, if they are not taught how to be safe, they don't really even reach even high school, and they drop out before. There are elopements, teenage pregnancies, there is child marriage, at scales today which we've not seen before because of the COVID. So how about integrating that curriculum into every school today? Because the sharpest students we've seen have run away because they've fallen in love at 15. And, and they've become victim of the system.
I don't mind taking. I think that's a fantastic, point that you raise, and it's one of the most critical things that does need to be integrated into the education system. I think Mohini talked a little bit about how you think of developing the value system within a school. So to my mind, that's one part of it, right? Which is that how do you educate the students within the school in terms of, love, abuses, how you think of your future and so on. You educate the teachers to identify the signs so that counseling can happen at the right time, proactively and so on. But to my mind, it's beyond that. It really goes out into the community as well. So what is the parents and that infrastructure really doing in order to drive that systemic change, which is my point. You can use the school as the center from an education perspective, but you cannot forget the fact that if you're really trying to drive change, systemic change, you have to carry the communities around with you, which is what are your options in the future? Is it to be a wife and a daughter and a child and that's it, a sister, and so on? Or are you really looking at futures and careers, and is your community going to support you to get there? So I think absolutely what you're saying is hugely critical.
This is actually a social issue. I totally agree with you. Because years of working in this space, you made us realize that the school is actually a huge fulcrum for any education or even a catchment area to reach the parents. Because this is the space where you start talking to society. And because today the way there's online consumption which is going on, children are watching age-inappropriate material. There is no adolescence as a stage today. They are forgetting the tasks of adolescence, which is making so much of juvenile offenders coming on in front. So I feel that's a really crucial thing which we all as educationists have to look at, and integrating a child safety and awareness school program in every school, every community, because then anything else which anybody else, all you amazing people are doing, it would actually be, it will reach its full fruit,
Completely agree with you. It's critical.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Very important question. Thank you. I think here there's a couple.
I'm very sorry to interrupt, so I can take one more question only, as we have time constraints.
Okay. Good evening. I'm Shalini Sahai, founder of Gandhisha Foundation. We are working in the field of education, health and services. My question is adding to her question. So especially in the government school environment, we talk about student learning outcomes. So what about the teacher learning outcomes? The capacity building is happening for the teachers. And this is my personal experience. We have been training teachers where we have been intervening or as a third party. So they have all kinds of bahanas that today I have a government workshop. Madam, how many things I will be doing today? I can't take the training program. I have documentation to be done. So when the training has been done, what is the effectiveness and the outcomes of the teacher which is to be measurable as the students are being measured? So your take on it. So
if I may just add to that, and I know that there have been some responses to this already. I think it's not as simple as saying just the teacher and what is the outcome that's coming from the teacher. I think it's a combination of factors, right? So have we skilled the teacher? Let's assume we have, right? So that effort and impact has happened. Teachers come for the workshop and so on. Have we skilled the teacher right? Has anyone taken a step back to see is where did this teacher need development, or have we just sent her or him for a workshop? So has this reskillment happen in the right stage, phase and subject which it's required to have happened. The last thing is that how is the child actually progressing from the school is one aspect where you see how does a child need to be developed and what is the impact of the work that the teacher is doing. But more importantly, that data can tell you what improvement the teacher needs. What are the areas she needs to develop in order to be better at her job? So I think it's not just about accountability, it's about how do you use that data to create a better system which is looping back into itself and saying, okay, I have teacher A who teaches English and math. She's doing a great job at math, but English, but English is suffering. So maybe she needs support at that particular subject, and that's where the learning intervention needs to come. And so a lot of this in other schools comes from the administrative system and how they look at that data. So I think that becomes an important way to look at it.
Viswanath.
So to address your question, I think the teacher is not the problem at all in any of this. Let me give you an example of the kind of teacher training that happens, and this is of course relevant to our thing, is that this teacher who is still struggling to speak English herself is being given training on how to teach grammar. Okay, from people who may not be from this country also. So the thing is that what is the relevant teaching and what is the level of the teacher and how do we lift the teacher from that level onwards? So first and foremost, recognize the fact that your maths teacher may not be able to solve a 9th standard maths sum, but has to teach the 9th standard syllabus. In Karadi Path, one of the things that we realize is the fact that when it comes to English, I am never going to be able to find a teacher in these environments who is going to be, capable of English because she's never received an English environment in her life to begin with. So the idea is that the teacher becomes student number one. All the English she's also learning as the content is actually being delivered to her. So she has a mentor-led model going on, with the result that after about 2 years of intervention, you have these teachers giving interviews in English in terms of Karadi Path kaise chal raha hai. So you can do it. I mean, what is required is the fact that you really have to think out of the box and innovate in terms of how you actually deal with the fact that you have to be grateful that there are teachers standing out there, delivering something to the best of their ability. But the system needs to respond with more innovation and much faster innovation and faster adoption.
So may I just say in 30 seconds that what you said was that if the teacher is not interested and they make bahanas, that's the word you used. That means, that's the word you used, that you make bahanas, I'm not here, I'm not there. That is when the administration has to crack down. Because, there is a certain amount of comfort in being a government teacher and getting your salary every month. I think that's what you were trying to say. But surely there is someone above them. There's a principal who has to be very proactive, not be sitting in his office, but actually been taking rounds the whole day. So if the administration needs to be strengthened, perhaps also needs counseling and training regularly.
Thank you, Mohini.
Deepak, small thing. And
Okay.
adding to this, understanding their challenges, their day-to-day challenges always helps. And at times being on the other side, it motivates them also. So spending some time with the teachers, understanding their day-to-day routine and the challenges always helps them, and then that can break that, jinx which is there in mind.
Beautiful. Thank you so much to my fellow panel members for the enriching thoughts, varied programs that you run. And thank you, audience, for participating and sharing your time with us.